The British Columbia Institute of Technology acknowledges that our campuses are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh.
Good morning. My name is Vivek Nakra, and here are your news updates to 11 o'clock. Leaders of British Columbia's main political parties have converged on Vancouver Island. They are holding campaigns on the last day of advance voting before the provincial election on Saturday. According to Election BC, more than 181,000 people have voted on Tuesday, breaking a record set on the first day of voting last week. NDP leader David Eby and BC Conservative leader John Rustad both have announcements scheduled in Nanaimo, while both of Green's two current seats are on the island. A woman was attacked by a man while she was walking near the cruise ship terminal at Canada Place. Vancouver police say that the 30-year-old man has been charged with aggravated assault and remains in custody after the unprovoked attack. The woman was left with injuries and required treatment in hospital after attacker repeatedly punched and kicked her in the face. The police arrested him at a residential building near East Pender and Columbia Streets in Vancouver's downtown East Side neighborhood. Online court record shows that a man with the same name has previously been charged and found guilty of assault causing bodily harm in June 2022 and October and November in 2023. The BC Sports Hall of Fame announcement day is today. Reporter Keenan Trikaskas has more on this annual event.
The BC Sports Hall of Fame is unveiling this year's inductees. Since 1966, the Hall of Fame has inducted over 400 people. This year's class includes 5 different athletes: baseball players Amanda Asai and Justin Morneau, swimmer Ryan Cochran, freestyle skier Cassie Sharp, and golfer Richard Zokol. Also being unveiled are 2 coaches, a sports medicine expert, a Little League team, a women's hockey team from the 1920s, a sports broadcaster, and a former WAC award winner. The event for the annual unveiling begins at 11 a.m. Keenan Tragaskis, BCIT's The Crow.
First Nation chiefs are gathering in Calgary as they prepare to vote on a landmark $4 billion child welfare reform agreement with Ottawa. The deal was struck in July between Canada, Chiefs on Ontario, and the Assembly of First Nation. It came after a nearly 2-decade legal fight over Canada's underfunding of on-reserve child welfare services. Chiefs in Ontario voted in favor of the agreement last week, but the National Chiefs Group is trying to renegotiate or strike down the deal. In an effort to strengthen the protection of Canada's fresh water, the Canadian government has announced the creation of the Canadian Water Agency. Our reporter Ethan Van Dop has the latest on some of the duties of the new agency.
Fresh water is one of Canada's most precious natural resources, with 7% of the world's fresh water supply located in Canada, which is why ensuring its protection is an important issue to Canadians, according to the new Canadian Water Agency. Some of the agency's responsibilities include strengthening freshwater management, working closely with partners to deliver major elements of the Freshwater Action Plan, and leading the development of a national freshwater data strategy. 8 bodies of water of national significance will receive funding from the agency, including the Fraser River and Lake Winnipeg, one of the world's largest bodies of freshwater. Ethan Van Dop, BCIT's The Crow.
A worker at a Crimea wildlife park in Russia died after being attacked by lions. Russian investigation committee says that the death occurred when the worker went into a cage at Tigan Park to clean it. The cage held 3 lions, but the worker did not lock an internal door that would separate her from the lions. Air India passengers got a lift from RCAF after bomb scare forces landing in Nunavut. More than 200 Air India passengers are on the ground in Chicago after their flight was diverted to Nunavut due to bomb threat. The airline thanked the Royal Canadian Air Force via social media for helping the ferry and directing it to their final destination. The airline's update also thanked the Canadian authorities and those at the Iqaluit International Airport for their support and assistance. Weather today is cloudy with a temperature of 12 degrees Celsius. It is expected to be sunny by the noon and there are some chances of shower in the evening. That was your news updates to 10 o'clock. My name is Vivek Nakra and thanks for listening to BCIT's The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Pet owners take their pet health very seriously, but often don't actually know what goes on behind the scenes. I can tell you, pet health is something really important to me as an owner of a dog and a cat, and I feel like not enough time and energy goes into helping those who help our pets.
That's right. Veterinarians and people who work in the veterinary industry are some of the most important workers of all because a lot of people have furry friends. I mean, especially what happened during the pandemic. I'd like to know how they're doing and is there anything that we can do to help?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people, when we talk about the medical field, automatically assume that we're talking about human health, and they don't really acknowledge the time and energy and also the downsides of working with animals in the animal health industry. And today we're going to dive into that. My name is Sophie Hansen.
I'm Philip Kovacevic.
And this is the More You Know podcast. And today's episode, Lending a Helping Paw, dives into the world of mental health challenges for those in the animal health, vet tech, and veterinarian industry. While I was doing my research, I actually found out 1 in 5 Canadian veterinarians and techs have reported suicide ideation, burnout, and depression.
Wow. And this is people who work with animals, so it really isn't sunshine and puppies, that is. It's not fun to hear.
Mm-hmm. And when I was speaking to Ellie Iraqi, who is actually a vet tech in a clinic in South Surrey and also a student at KPU studying biology, she told me that every day offers something new and something that goes underreported.
A couple weeks ago, or a few weeks ago, we had this dog in who was very, very old and who could not walk, and all she could do was breathe. She was not reacting to any of our touches, but the owner did not want her put down. I thought about that a lot in my car on the way home, and I thought about it while I was trying to go to bed, and it was keeping me up because it's hard having to go in and deal with these things.
That is something that's just really hard to hear. I have an old dog myself. He's about 80 in human years. He's a spry fellow, I can tell you that. He moves around, he eats quite a bit. Also throws up a little bit, but I think that's just a part of his personality. He's got cataracts too, so he's completely blind in his right eye, partially in his left, so he's about 3/4 blind, but he still moves around the house pretty well because of he knows where everything is pretty much. Doesn't stop him from occasionally bumping into a wall, but he's a happy, pretty much healthy dog that just wants to live. And from listening to this, it sounds like the dog doesn't want to leave the owner, but it knows it's not long for this world either. And the owner obviously doesn't want to leave them either.
Mm-hmm. I can tell you I definitely went through a similar situation. I can tell you I definitely went through a similar situation many years ago when I was probably in 5th grade. And I had a dog, an old basset hound, who was very stinky. He was 13 when we decided that it would be best to put him down because he had developed cancer to the point of which he couldn't walk downstairs in order to go to the bathroom in our backyard. So my family, that was a really, really tough decision for us. So I can imagine at a vet tech's point of view or a veterinarian's having to do that sort of thing, euthanasia, which is such an emotional time for many different parties, having to do that on a daily basis, multiple times a day, maybe. So imagine that now impacting your mental health, having to sit with that, having to go home and try and decompress. I can only imagine how difficult that is.
I feel like the media really glamorizes going into this industry because they make it out like you are able to play with animals all day and like it's this big party, but it's not. And this is kind of the reality of it, because it's not, and it's a difficult job, and it does take a toll on your mental health. And even like there's sometimes when people will drop off their dogs to be euthanized, but they won't stay for it. They'll just drop the dog off or the cat and pay for the euthanasia and then leave.
Yeah, that also reminds me of a conversation that I had with Dr. Marco Venus. He's a veterinarian and also a director at the Society of BC Veterinarians. He talked about how veterinarians experience burnout and mental health issues from just the differences in patients they get per day.
You're dealing with a lot of emotions, and it can be a roller coaster, right? One moment, you have a happy family that brings in a new puppy that you need to vaccinate, and everybody's happy. The next moment, we have another family who's bringing in, a 14-and-a-half-year-old golden retriever that is riddled with cancer that you have to put down.
I can only imagine, after a week of experiencing something like that, your emotions being whipped left and right, I can only imagine the kind of turmoil that you're dealing with even when you leave the office. Like we heard Ellie mention, you're sitting in your car driving home. The radio's probably off, and you're sitting there with your thoughts. Maybe they're keeping you up at night because of all of these different situations that you're having to deal with. And potentially you may not have the resources to deal with those situations. And without those resources, you're left to kind of just think about them and exist thinking about those. Without those proper resources, it's going to be really hard to move past that.
Reach out. The most important part is that you need to realize that you're not alone. There's a lot of veterinarians that are struggling with those things, and you do not have to go through it alone. If you reach out, there is a lot of programs that will help you. To give you an idea, one of the things that we do as a society, the Society of BC Veterinarians, we have a mentorship program where we can basically put these veterinarians in touch, with another veterinarian who on a volunteer and also on a confidential basis, can act as a sounding board. Just sometimes just talking to somebody who is also in the trenches, who understands from personal experience, what you are feeling and how does that affect you, can be a huge relief. To give you an example, not that long ago, I was contacted by a young veterinarian who got her first official board complaint. So, that means that, a client felt that she did something wrong, complained to the Veterinary Medical Association, and, they, of course, are tasked with investigating those complaints, and that's, pretty intense process. So it was stressing her out, terribly, but just being able to talk to somebody who said, well, yeah, this is the process, this is how it works. A lot of people go through this, a lot of veterinarians go through this. It was, tremendously helpful for her, and it really kind of got her off the ledge.
And burnout is one of the most common things that veterinary workers deal with. But not a lot of people know the signs, at least not until it's too late. So there's a feeling of hopelessness that can come from this as you do this kind of job. Exhaustion, of course, and just a reduced performance in a job that you got into because you care.
Yeah, and I can tell you from firsthand experience that these signs can be really, really hard to identify in the middle of dealing with all of these daily activities. In my conversations with Ellie, she actually shared that she seeks a therapist to help her. She also shared that she deals with borderline personality disorder, so dealing with that in terms of mental health, and also dealing with a profession that it takes a toll on your mental health constantly. can be really hard to deal with if you don't have the proper outlets for it. She said that finding a healthy way to deal with these emotions can actually make you an even better caretaker for the animals.
I found that when I have people that I trust around me that allow me to talk about things, and not even just give me solutions, just allow me to talk about them, that's been a really, really positive outlet for me. Nothing has worked as well as talking things out. And being able to talk about things and get them off your chest, because a lot of times things are confidential and we're not allowed to give the nitty-gritty details of them, but being able to talk about things in a confidential setting with a therapist who you're able to trust and who will give you not just advice, but just a safe space to talk about things, I think that that would really, really benefit the medical industry.
I feel like this is a universal experience for everyone in every kind of industry here in Canada. And through our research, we actually found that Statistics Canada reported in 2018 that roughly 5.3 million people in Canada had mentioned they needed some sort of help for their mental health. And I feel like, since we've gone through the pandemic and since we've seen internet access increase in many different ways, I feel like that number is bound to increase by a ton.
Yeah, I know I've certainly had problems of my own when it comes to my mental health. And the one thing I've just been very glad that I did was I reached out. I talked to people who care about me and I care about them. And it just became a very honest conversation that helped me tremendously put things into perspective and realize things aren't as bad as I thought.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode, Lending a Helping Paw. This has been the More You Know podcast, and I'm Sophie Hansen.
And I'm Philip Kovacevic. Give your furry friends a treat on us, and we'll see you next week. This episode was produced and edited by Philip Kovacevic and Sophie Hansen, with music by Sweet Beats 808S on Pixabay.
A big thank you to our guests Ellie Araki and Dr. Marco Venus for speaking to us on such an important topic.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.